Sam, welcome. It's such an immense pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks so much, Andrea. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Sam, from the discussions that we have had until now, you have been on an incredible journey over the last few years. And despite thinking that you were tone deaf, today people call your voice the most healing sound they've ever heard. When did you first sense that your voice was more than just sound and that it could heal, transform, and awaken others?
So it was actually relatively recently, given what's happened in the last few years. So it was actually in 2023 when I discovered that I had this ability with sound frequency. Before then, I worked with breath, so there was a continuity with it. It was a different way of looking at working with energy, but it was very distinct. So it was quite a surprise when this came through in 2023, and it's been this collapsing time process this last few years to be able to just experience what's emerging in the field and the level of impact that's already had.
How did that actually emerge for you?
Yeah, during one of the leadership programs I did, maybe in 2019, that was the first time that I kind of stepped out of the story about, not being able to sing or anything like that. And I had people, I shared some music, which a song I'd created in the group, and people were actually encouraging. So that actually had me get up on stage and not worry about how I sounded, but just belt out regardless. And so that was the first moment where I shifted out of like, I can't sing, I'm tone deaf, all these other things, into a different kind of story and narrative. And over time, when this emerged in 2023, I was obviously ready to truly step into whatever wanted to come through me. And what I've really discovered is it's been a remembrance. It's not like I suddenly woke up one day and I never had done this before. It's like our DNA holds material and energy and information, including ideas and conceptions of who we are and ways of operating and different gifts that we would never even imagine possible. And certainly that was the case with me. And really what I've discovered is that, okay, I've been doing this beyond my own lifetime. If I hadn't have been doing it beyond my own lifetime, there's no way in hell that I would be able to do what I do because I was never trained to do it, right? Most people would go train to be a singer or they'll train to do sound healing or any of these other kinds of things, whereas this just emerged as a natural ability. And so it's just a waking up to what was already there.
How incredible. What is actually happening at the level of the brain and body when
Yeah.
you use your voice to shift frequency?
I've talked to neuroscientists about it and they've given me different explanations. So a couple of ways that I've thought about it and the way that they've kind of mirrored it back was the first one was I was chatting to a neuroscientist and he was describing it as, I was like, oh, it sounds like what I'm doing is I'm taking, areas of the body where there is a lack of resonance and we're creating a space for that energy to transmute. So we're taking, instead of dis-ease or dis-resonance, and we're creating more of an equilibrium within the cells, some more harmony within the cells. And so then energy doesn't die, right? So if you have a tension in your throat or a pain in your stomach or any of these things, we want to experience the energy as it is. And then as we experience it as it is, what it does is it creates the space for the energy to transmute. And then as it transmutes, we can tap into a higher field of cellular intelligence. And they'll talk about a unified field of consciousness. And what happens generally is when I hit a very, very high frequency, that's when people tend to go into a space where the mind is distilled. So they'll talk about basically the prefrontal cortex is being shut off, which is allowing the logical mind to no longer be present, which allows for this deeper sense of presence to come through. But also it goes beyond just experiencing presence. People can utilize that to actually have downloads and transmissions or a shift in, belief systems within the brain itself. I've had people go, this is a belief like money is poverty to money is wealth within an hour. And what that looks like is going from, I want to create $4.5 million in the next 4 years, but I actually have this view of money, to I have $100 million vision emerging from this new paradigm of money as wealth. So it shows you how radical a shift it can create in terms of what's going on in the brain, as well as what's going on in the cells. So it's creating this new harmony, but then also allowing for this complete expansion in the vision that wants to come through and just who that person sees themselves to be.
And when you do not have that harmony, as you mentioned before, does this express itself only in some form of physical tension or pain, or have you seen something else emerge as well?
Look, I think there's a variety of things. So the easiest things to look at are the subtle energies that show up in the body. So, every single person that I've ever worked with, there's going to be something that is going to be showing up in the body. So the way I would work with someone is they'll tell me what they want to create, and then we'll look at what's in the way. And then I'll be asking them, where do you feel that? And what's the emotion that's behind that? And when we locate that, one, it cues in. So if they say, I feel this in my neck, and the intent, and this is, and the emotion that I'm experiencing is one of anger. Great. So then when I'm going to bring through the sound, which I'm going to channel through, I'm going to come from a space of allowing to honor the anger which is there rather than wishing it wasn't there. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to how we tend to operate as human beings. We don't want to be angry, so we try and push it away or resist it. Whereas this is actually, no, let's experience the emotion as it is. And again, talking to neuroscientists, they said, like, what's happening with your frequencies is you're basically hitting the emotional centers of the brain, and then you're also hitting the autonomic nervous system, and then you're bypassing the cortical, which is the control mechanism. So it's creating more space for surrender, is how I really see it. But it's also the honoring of the emotions that are there. So a lot of us as human beings, myself included, we weren't necessarily taught very well how to process our emotions. And so we push them away, or we don't want to experience them, or we're going to numb them. And this is actually the opportunity to experience everything that's there, to create the most space that you could ever imagine. And what that can look like is like, people's jaws relax, they lie back in the chair, and then it's not just about the state of relaxation that comes through, the state of intelligence, but then it's what happens in material reality from that state. Because if you just had a nice relaxed experience, you could go to a sound bath. But if you wanted something which is going to transform the way you're experiencing life and the way that you operate, then you want to take that context of what you created and actually bring it into form. And that's what we're doing. We're actually taking through an experience where the shift is so powerful that people are actually going and creating these radical shifts in their businesses within, sometimes within days, sometimes the same day. I've had a chef who recently, basically, he was blown away because literally the same day that we worked together, he had the biggest day of sales ever in any of his companies, just because we basically allowed for the energetic field to be coherent. And what that means is, he was in a space of striving to create more. And that's a very common pattern, but we can all probably relate to at different times. And what happened instead is we just got him to a place of ease, and it didn't have to be hard anymore, which is one of the common beliefs that we have kind of inherited, is that things have to be hard. So it's actually taking the opposite, like, all right, let's actually create ease as a catalyst for more flow in your life. And so that flow just naturally came because he was harmonizing at the level in a frequency or an energetic field, which allowed for him to actually pull that in.
If I unpack what you just shared, it starts with the realization of some sort of conscious or subconscious pain or issue or something that seems to be standing in our way. And then through your sounds, you create this resonance and healing that actually bring this clarity for individuals. So as they listen to your voice, ultimately they have, and they surrender, as you mentioned, they have this awakening or this clarity about actions to pursue, or they get answers to questions that they were struggling to answer themselves, and so on. Is that a little bit the process?
For sure. And there's no limitation to what it can look like. I've done it to help people restructure companies within the moment, because we get them to a place where there's distilled. So there's no mind interrupting. There's no figuring it out, which is happening. And from that space, I'll basically take them through a process which allows them to discover, like, okay, let's imagine, you need to restructure your company. Okay, well, what would you be doing if you were going to do that? Well, I'd be in front of the whiteboard and I'd be writing out all these different things. I said, okay, great, let's do it now. So then I basically said, okay, so as I bring through this sound, I want you to experience yourself restructuring the company while you're writing it out on the whiteboard. And then at the end, I want you to tell me what you did. And basically within that 2 minutes, they created that pathway. So instead of spending 2 hours doing it, suddenly within 2 minutes, they'd already created a solution. And it was different to what they would have done if they tried to figure it out, because suddenly the solution emerged, because obviously we already have everything within us to be able to create what we want. But often at times we experience that not being the case. And so when that is happening, we rely on trying to figure it out because we don't feel like we've got the answers. Whereas this is actually allowing you to discover, oh, I already have the answer. The answer is coming through me. Now this is what I'm doing.
I think that's just so powerful.
Yeah, it blows me away, honestly, Andrea, to witness people. Like the way I often describe it is like being a conductor of an orchestra, whereas I'm using my voice to basically tune in to what's the resonant frequency that is needed to be experienced by them to bring harmony to them. But then as we bring more and more harmony, we wake up more and more intelligence within themselves, and then they wake up. They wake up to who they are, and they start to speak from a different space, and they start to create from a different space, and then they start to actually allow what shows up in life and vision and everything else and who they know themselves to be and the leaders that they are to be a reflection of what's coming through in these sessions.
I'm sure our listeners would love to experience just a little tiny version of the
Sure.
awesome experiences that you bring the people that you work with. Is there something that you can take us in terms of a mini journey so we
Absolutely.
can experience your sound? And
100%.
this is also an invitation for the listeners to potentially maybe think about a challenge or something that they want unlocked or some sort of clarity that they're looking to obtain, and through whatever journey you're going to be taking us and the listeners, hopefully it will bring some positive momentum for them, more clarity and greater harmony. So would you be open
Absolutely.
to do that?
100%. We can absolutely do that. So
Okay.
what I invite you to do, Andrea, yourself included, is to close your eyes. And I want you to take some breaths. I want you to breathe in through the abdomen, really allow that breath to expand. And then when you're ready, just allow it to effortlessly fall away. And then just allow that expansion of breath. And then ready, just drop it away. And just keep allowing that breath for the next few seconds, just to create more and more space to regulate, to ground you. And now allow yourself to feel the energy coming into the soles of your feet. And start to imagine that that energy is coming from below the crust of the earth. And as you do that, I want you just to put your attention on something which would make a difference to you in this moment. Whatever it is that you're wanting to either create, maybe it's a state that you want to experience, maybe something you want to let go of, whatever it is, whatever comes through to you in this moment, allow that to be whatever your focus is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring through a sound. And imagine this sound is going to come from below the crust of the earth. And it's going to get higher and higher in resonance. And for some of you, as it hits this higher and higher resonance, you'll actually find like the mind will no longer be present. You'll go to a different space. For others of you, it might show you something which you didn't want to see. And you've been avoiding. And for others of you, it'll be something entirely in between. Whatever it is, just know that you're safe and this is perfect. And I've guided thousands of people through this process, and that you can do this too. All right. So it might be feeling a little bit more relaxed, a little bit calmer. So I want you just to, again, just allow yourself some breaths. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to allow this other tone. And this is a tone which tends to create more safety in the nervous system. Sometimes it's related with sadness and grief, but sometimes it just is that feeling of being safe. So this is what I'm going to bring you through. feels like it might be a little bit lighter. Might be for you, Andrea, might be for you in the field. And so if that's the case, I want you just to allow yourself to create more space. And what that could be is there could be a space where it feels a bit lighter in the body. It could be somewhere where it's the tingling. And whatever it is, I want you to feel connected to wherever this energy feels like it comes from. It could be something which is young. It could be something which is beyond your lifetime, whatever you sense. And all I want you to do is I want you to allow yourself to create a feeling of love in the spaces where it feels lighter and connect in with love for this part of you. I'm going to bring through what I call a frequency of love just to allow that to expand. Again, just take some breaths. Just allow yourself to feel that breath. And now what I want you to do is I want you to connect in back with your intention. And I want you to allow yourself to experience this already happening. I want you to allow yourself to connect in with a version of you out in the field where this has already occurred. And again, I'll bring this sound through from below the crust of the earth so we can ground it in to allow it to keep coming through in materiality, and then connecting with your higher self so we can allow these two to support. Again, take some breaths. We're going to do one final thing. And now I want you to see what's going to allow whatever you experienced out in the field to transpire. So we're coming back into now. And I want you just to notice what was the bridge? What allowed for that to happen in reality from where you are right now? So take some breaths. Just allow yourself to come back to wherever you're at. Get some water if you need some water. Allow yourself to really replenish the cells. And you can listen back to this whenever you want. For some of you, it might have been something really opened up. For others of you, it might be something small. For others of you, it might have been a little bit uncomfortable. Whatever it is perfect. But just know this is just a muscle that we're building. We're allowing ourselves for this new intelligence to come through ourselves and to allow this to become the new default for us. Allow more ease to come into our body.
Wow, thank you so much, Sam. This is so unique and so special. I'm so happy you're able to share it with our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
What is the most surprising thing that someone has said after experiencing your voice?
I think when they said this is the most healing sound I've ever heard, that was pretty surprising because it was so far out of my own self-conception. So to hear that was quite profound. Yeah, I don't know if there's something which jumps out at me beyond that in this particular moment. I'm coming back from, just in the space of the channeling. So it's always interesting to kind of like drop back into the human more side of things. But yeah, that's the moment that really kind of comes through in terms of just like, oh, there's something about my voice which is well beyond what I ever imagined it could offer to the world.
And what's a belief about yourself that you had to release or surrender to in order to step into who you are now?
There's been a lot, to be honest. I was of the belief until I was 31. I'm now 39. that I was shy and anxious. So, letting go of that self conception, the identity of I have anxiety. Back when I used to coach, that was one of the first things I did, was the reverse engineering of that, and understanding, oh, this identity was something I'd created as a little boy based on how I experienced myself and how others experienced me. And then it became the reality that I lived into. But this is taking it to another dimension entirely. I think when I changed my business from the philosophical coach to Soul Purpose Leaders, which is the company that I run, the main thing which I needed was courage in that moment. I remember like trembling and listening to a friend of audio, which is called I Am Courage, and just feeling all of what was getting activated within my body in that moment, and feeling, this is a seismic moment, not because it's changing a company name, but because I was choosing to go in a direction where the name of the company had been given in a breathwork transmission. And, I was not a person who wrote about the soul. I was a philosopher who wrote about a non-theistic way of looking at politics and law. I was, someone who was anti-purpose as a coach. The only thing which was coherent to me was leadership. So when this came through, the first time I heard it, my eyes are closed in a breathwork experience, was, nah, that's not it. And then it came through immediately after, within seconds. And as soon as it came through again, I was like, okay, like this is obviously not an accident. And none of my mind was working at that time. I just went with it. And as I surrendered, it just started to open up a field of like, okay, these are the different things you're here to do. You're meant to heal generational trauma over here. You're meant to work with these people. And I just kept surrendering. So I'd say the courage to be able to just go for it, no matter how it looks on the outside, no matter what people would think, my own belief about this is weird or any of that kind of stuff. I had to release all of that and just allow myself to surrender to the unknown, and then the trust of like the certainty of like, if I'm working with someone, there's a certainty that will come through me in terms of what is the sound that they need to hear in this moment to be able to access whatever it is. Like I was just in Bali and I'm working with different leaders across, in a group activation. And it's not unusual for someone to have an extraordinary experience, and then another person might be feeling disconnected. And so when they raise their hand and they say, I'm feeling disconnected, it's like, all right, I know exactly what's needed. In this particular person, they needed to create more safety within their nervous system. So I'm going to bring through that sound to create that. And now, sharing around like, oh, this healed a wound, that she's been carrying for at least her lifetime. So now she's expressing herself in a different way, and she's getting to operate in a different way because we did whatever was needed to bring her back into harmony, bring her back into that level of connection. So I would say that trust and certainty from which I operate now is probably one of the biggest shifts in my own way of operating compared to when I was an academic and there was a lot of uncertainty. Is this good enough or anything like that? Like I don't have that when I'm toning. I just literally just tune in and that's it.
How do you find your own harmony? And
Yeah.
in the process of sharing these beautiful sounds with others and you're realizing the impact it has on them, does it also have an impact on you?
It's a good question. It has some of an impact. So I can feel the shift in the energy in the room. I can feel when something gets clearer. So I can feel when my state is getting clearer. Like what will tend to happen is I call it like a facelift for the soul. So the sheen across the forehead like keeps me younger and over and over. And when I listen to my own activations, those are the ones which have the most impact. They tend to have a very emotional impact. So my eyes will tend to water without necessarily knowing why when I'm listening to these activations. But it doesn't take me into the spaces which people have gone into, but people go into some pretty interesting spaces. One of the neuroscientists that I worked with said that sound took me back to the beginning of time, and this sound took me into the caveman times. Okay, like those aren't things which I'm replicating. And as I understand it from a neuroscience point of view, that's partly because I'm the creator of the sounds. The brain is operating in a slightly different way to how it's going to be if someone is in this pure space of surrender, because they don't know what's coming next. And or even if they do, their body is going to respond differently each time. Whereas I don't know if that's true, because we're more and more looking at the idea that consciousness lies outside the brain. So I'd like to think there is a possibility of really accessing this deeper than I've accessed it so far. I did have an experience in Bali where I was invited by a Balinese priest to go into a place called Goa Giriputri, which is known as kind of the womb temple. And so I went into a small cave at the very, very back of the larger temple. And I lied down on the ground, took off my shoes to try and get connected with the ground. And all I was doing was looking to be able to experience more of my own frequency, more of my own vibration. And I thought that as I would tone, the sound would bounce back from the cave, but that didn't happen. So instead, what I did is I just allowed myself to feel the vibration coming through the floor of the cave and really connect in and allow myself to go through experiences which didn't feel like they had been transmuted energetically for me at an emotional level, and create more harmony and more safety within my nervous system. So it almost felt like a nurturing hug from, like, a mother essentially at times. So that's probably the most, I've felt my own frequency, but in general, it doesn't at this point in time have the same level of receptivity with myself as it has with others.
Incredible. And what does joy sound like and feel like to you in those moments?
Like, I get to have a lot of joy in my life, like seeing people come alive in this way and knowing that you're playing a role in a really beautiful way in witnessing it. Like, one of the women in the activation in Bali, like, she was just the pure expression of joy. Like, she just started laughing hysterically because when all of the different concerns and things that were there just disappeared, there was only this purest expression of joy, and she was bending over in laughter. And somewhere it's captured. I'm looking forward to seeing and witnessing what it actually looked like. But to be present to that, like, that's miraculous. Like, there is hard to put into words how extraordinary it is to see a human being in such a state of surrender, but in a state of joy which is beyond anything they're likely ever experienced in their life, beyond being a child, right? Because even as a child, there already is a self-conception which is coming in, which is blocking it from a pretty early age, and which shuts down the level of joy that we can experience. Like, this is literally as unbridled as I've ever seen a human being become. In that for me creates a huge amount of joy in my being. And then knowing that a lot of my time as an academic was about, I want to fulfill my potential, and now I get to experience that I already am, right? Like, there's more to come, but it's not like there's something out there which is called Sam's potential. It's already happening, and the more I live into that's already is, rather than wishing it was here rather than there, right, the more I get to experience the effortless joy that comes from that.
So you're living your highest potential today as a result of what has emerged since 2023.
Absolutely.
Incredible. How beautiful. And if we continue the conversation about joy, and if there would be a recipe for joy, what do you believe would be the three main ingredients from your life experience?
So one of the things which brings me a lot of joy these days, and it's a very much connecting in with the childlike innocence, is I go outside and I look at the sun, even when it's, London winter. And I just, I close my eyes and I allow myself to get connected with the colors that I see with my eyes closed. And this is something which has happened, in the last year. Before that, I didn't have that experience. But now, as I've created this new relationship with the sun, this happens all the time. And so I'll see these beautiful hues of like purple or orange, or most recently, I see this kind of almost color of like unity consciousness. So in Bali, at one of the sunrises that I watched, this heart came through, which was almost like this teal color when someone says, oh, that's like a color of unity consciousness, which for me was this absolutely beautiful moment, because it was a color which I brought into this app that I developed. And I didn't really know that it wasn't accidental until that moment. And so that's something which I would say is just one of the most profound experiences of presence that I get to have. Like, my partner's going off, this week you need to go get something from the hardware store. And I'm like, I'm just going to stay here and look at the sun, right? So I spent like 10 minutes just closing my eyes. People might think, like, what is this guy doing? And just really being with what's coming through and allowing myself to not try and get anywhere in the moment, but just to be in that space of deep presence. That's like, it's one of the most fun experiences I can imagine.
Given that you mentioned earlier that you believe that this gift that you have within you has always been there, you were just not aware of it. The question that I have relates now more to, do you believe that our life is destined to be in a specific way, or that we are the creators of our own journey?
I think we're the creators of our own journey, and whether we're going to receive certain gifts and things that are wanting to be remembered is going to depend on what's the level of receptivity we're ready to receive. Right? Like, just like people want to receive more love or they want to receive more wealth, if you want to expand yourself spiritually, what are you ready? What capacity are you at in terms of receptivity? Because if you're not ready to receive it, it's not going to come through in any area of life, spiritually as well. So for me, it was just like there was a readiness to be able to upgrade to that next level. And so then that's what came through. And I like to think, most of us at 1% of the potential that we have, not as a limitation, but as a possibility. And I think I see myself as a good example of that, because for the longest time, my dream was to have half as good a career as my academic father. My father's a professor of political philosophy, political theory, so he's had a distinguished career. But I did not imagine that I could do anything in my life which was any more than half as good as my dad, right? And so when I broke out of that, it just started to show me like, wow, I had no clue who I was, but most of us have no clue who we are. And that's such a beautiful possibility if we choose to see it that way. Some people might get scared shitless about that, but for me, it's just like, oh, wow, like this idea of potential, it's not just like some buzzword. It's actually like what's dormant, what wants to be activated within us, and what's latent that wants to be shown once we get ready to be shown it.
If someone feels stuck right now and is reflecting on a new path to pursue to find greater purpose, greater life fulfillment, do you feel there's some foundational actions that would need to take in order for them to be able to feel this resonance that you spoke about and embrace maybe more openly some of the activities that you took us through earlier with your sound healing and resonance?
Sure, like, that's the smallest of tastes of resonance. So if someone's feeling stuck, the first thing they want to do, I would say, is they want to not judge themselves about feeling stuck. And I can speak from experience of what that felt like for me. When I was an academic, there was a long period of time where I really felt stuck, and I really just felt like I was losing at life. I was a failure. Had a lot of shame. I wasn't fulfilling my potential. And at its worst, I remember going out onto the balcony of my dad's flat in central London and thinking about jumping off the balcony because I thought maybe that would be it's an easier way out. And then it was only because I recalled someone who was close to me who had lost someone to suicide that I actually came back in, because I'm like, no matter how bad I am, I know this is going to have a negative impact on people who do care about me and love me. So I came back in. But there was a long time where I'd literally be like, I remember crawled up in a ball in my bed because I felt so much shame about who I was. So the first thing I'll say is like, really allow yourself to just be with what's there. Like there's nothing wrong that you're experiencing this. There's an opportunity which comes from sitting with everything that's there. But the first thing that I would say is you want to start to connect in with love for yourself, because that person, that version of me, had no love for himself at that time, and so he pushed away love from anyone who was trying to bring love in, right? And so the frequency that I talk about, the frequency of love, can actually be really challenging for some people to hear if they're not ready to receive love. And that's where that sound of safety can be more pertinent, because it's actually creating what's missing. To receive love, you need to be safe to receive, right? I know a lot of people who don't feel safe to receive love because they don't feel safe, full stop. So we need to allow this recalibration in the nervous system. And one of the things that I've developed is around building that safety so people can experience it every day, right? It's called inner resonance. And it's this 8-minute activation, which allows people to just come back into equilibrium. And it's a starting point. It's a starting point to just experience what's there, allow your intention to drive through what the emotions want to show in the body, and then come back into that equilibrium. And I would say 95% of people that have experienced this have this profound shift from the first 8 minutes of what's going through, because they're listening in a different way and their body's listening in a different way in these moments when they're connecting in with what's there, rather than trying to figure it out, rather than wishing it was otherwise, just experiencing the motion as it is. And it creates calm. I've seen people who are in an extremely angry state on a call, and then they've listened to this, and then they're just back in a placid, calm, present way, because all of the noise which was outwardly projecting from their mind was no longer there in that moment, so they could come back into this harmonious state, right? So that would be my invitation is, and I've created this platform to be able to bring this to humanity at scale, to allow people to really recognize that, okay, there's something which is not resonating. And just as I might not like Slipknot as much as I like classical jazz, there's some part of me which I don't like to the way that I like this other aspect of me. So what's the part of me that I need to integrate, which I haven't been honoring, that if I honored it, it would actually create the space for something new to emerge, right? Because rather than thinking there's anything wrong with us or there's any part to fix, for me, it's just about integrating the different parts of us which haven't received necessarily the same amount of love, care, whatever it is that is needed, to be able to feel whole, right? To actually, so we can come back out of the disillusion or the illusion that we aren't complete or we're somehow broken or any of these other things that we can feel or take on as human beings, and just really start to experience I am perfect as I am, not as just a cliche, but actually, no, like there's nothing wrong. I'm perfect as I am. I am loved. I am love, and start to come back into that vibration. But it's a process, right? And that's why I recommend resonance from a daily perspective to bring people back into this space, not just like as a, people often call me like a freedom activator because people go into these spaces of freedom. And the reason is we're not focusing on creating freedom. We're focusing on what they want. We're clearing a pathway from the thing which feels in the way. And as we do that, I ask them, what are you experiencing? They say freedom. And so freedom is just the space that opens up when the thing that you think is in the way is no longer present. And then a pathway emerges to the thing that you do want. And so I say, right, do you want freedom once or do you want to experience it daily? And if you want to experience freedom daily, this is the pathway to be able to cultivate that over and over again, rather than being in the illusion of freedom as a destination, right? Which keeps you chasing, keeps you striving, keeps you pushing, keeps it being hard, and all the other things that we could all fall into as human beings, because that's part of the human journey, is to allow ourselves to experience something and then come back into equilibrium, right? So that would be my way of thinking about it.
Amazing. And what is the website where people can learn more about everything that you have shared and access the specific application that is now available?
Sure. My company is called Soul Purpose Leaders, and it's soul as in SOUL rather than the sole of your foot. And then the app is resonanceos.io. And people can experience it for 5 days. And what tends to happen is within the first 8 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on which activation they choose, they're already in this space of feeling a transformation happening. So this is my way of giving back to society and allowing this to spread as far as possible.
Sam, any final words of wisdom?
Sure. Joy's been a topic that back when I had a podcast a few years ago was one of the things that I got to speak about with a dear friend who wrote on joy. And it's been so interesting to see my own journey of coming back into joy, right? And to think about 1,000,000 years of joy is an interesting concept, right? Like, what would it look like if we collectively were all in the vibration of joy, even for a few moments a day, right? Would that be sufficient to create 1,000,000 years of joy, given that there's 8 billion people on the planet? How many minutes of joy would we need to experience in a day as a collective to be able to create 1,000,000 years of joy? And if it's only a few minutes, well, what's in the way of you actually creating the space to have those few minutes a day? And imagine all you had to do was press a button, put on some headphones, and then within 8 minutes, you were experiencing joy. What difference would that make to your life? And if that's something which you feel is worthwhile, then my invitation is go and experience this. Go and experience what Resonance OS can do and see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't resonate, okay, there's lots of things in the world which might. But see, what is it that's bringing you into alignment? For me, it's not about like figuring it out. It's just feeling into what feels aligned. And I allow my body to tell me more and more what that alignment looks like. So that'll be my suggestion.
Thank you, Sam. It has been an immense pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for the journey that you have taken all of us on. I wish you immense success moving forward and excited to learn about the new endeavors that you'll be pursuing in the future. You're just at the beginning of incredible things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been a real pleasure.